A lot of brands are trying to force AOV upon a customer instead of actually like earning the right to do so. Right? Like the reason I say that is we see a lot of brands that don't actually understand how to set up incentives based on what their actual AOV is, right? So for example, if you're a brand and you set like a free shipping threshold at $75 when your AOV was already $70, like you're not actually lifting anything. You're just discounting customers who are already going to spend that much. Um, and it actually just turns into a margin hit.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. Today I'm joined with Ben Sharf, who is the co-founder of Platter. They are a Shopify Platinum agency. And today we are going to talk about optimizing average order value. Definitely something that is becoming more important than ever, as it always was. But as brands get squeezed on the first order and need to be profitable, I think there's a lot of discussions at the moment going on strategies, advice. When can you take it potentially too far, where it affects your conversion rate? So Ben has worked with over 200 stores in the last 4 years. I know he's constantly speaking to founders all day through visiting them in New York. So he's going to have a lot of insights to give on this topic. So Ben, let's just get straight into the first one. So based on your experience, what's the biggest fundamental mistake when a new store comes to Platter or you ordered them where they can instantly improve?
A lot of brands are trying to force AOV upon a customer instead of actually like earning the right to do so. Right? Like the reason I say that is we see a lot of brands that don't actually understand how to set up incentives based on what their actual AOV is, right? So for example, if you're a brand and you set like a free shipping threshold at $75 when your AOV was already $70, like you're not actually lifting anything. You're just discounting customers who are already going to spend that much. Um, and it actually just turns into a margin hit. So like you need to understand what your AOV is and how to actually use that lever to drive incremental dollars. And the other issue is that people just think if they add in like a bunch of generic upsells, like I don't know, carousel with 10 products, they think that people are going to spend more, but it actually just creates decision paralysis. It doesn't result in a higher cart value. In a lot of cases, it might be a lower one. Um, and then I think that one other issue to add to this is just around like product discovery. If you have poor product discovery, inherently you're making it harder for people to find the items that they want to spend more money. So I know that the question was one answer, but I would say these are three different parts to the same problem that we see over and over.
Let's start with the last, or rather work in reverse. How would you tackle poor product discovery and diagnose that in the first place?
Well, I think it's understanding your catalog, right? So one of the things that we dig very deep into and realize a lot of brands don't is like how do certain products pair well together with other ones? So like depending on what you're actually trying to buy, how can we help guide you to buy other products that are complementary and just more broadly beyond that, like depending on the size of your catalog, you have to actually think through like what are the layers of discovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you only four SKUs where you have a menu that just has those four SKUs as standalone like cards, or do you have 1,000 SKUs? And now you have to think about like how are we categorizing these? Like, what are the subcategories within categories? And ultimately thinking about like how do we guide the customer where we want them to go. I just think the problem is that some brands don't actually understand the impact of poor product discovery, so they're not really thinking through like how do we architect our catalog to drive the consumer where we want them to be.
It's very interesting. And you mentioned about the in-court upsells strategically. How would you approach this? Because I'm assuming just generically, like you've just said, throwing random products into the court is not the way to go, and you need to earn that trust. Are you looking as it pertains to the top sellers when you take a brand on board and creating unique permutations, or is there a more of like a different approach that you're taking to creating this?
Yeah, so I would say one of the unique parts about Platter as a business is that we're an agency, but we're also a technology provider in that like we have our own Shopify theme and our own Shopify app. Within the Shopify app, because of the technology background we have within our team, we ran like a data study with a handful of our customers that like blew my mind and ultimately like made me realize how misused the frequently bought together function is on so many stores, right? So traditionally, a lot of brands will just have like generic frequently bought together modules that don't have like that much of like a data set behind it as to like, when you have this product in your cart, or even on a product page, if you have this product, like what should the buy like pairs well with product be in tandem
Yep.
with that? A lot of brands truly are just like guessing. One of the really interesting things that we found, and like I'll use like supplements for example. We had a handful of supplement brands that we were already working with where we took their historical data over like the last 90 days and basically decoupled for every product that is bought, what is the most popular other product that is bought with that product. And what we actually found was the most frequently purchased product as like your add-on was the same SKU in a different flavor.
Mm.
Right. So my example for you is like, imagine you're buying like an electrolyte product and you just buy like the lemon lime hydration product. A lot
Yep.
of brands would be like, oh, like I'll pair that with a shaker bottle so you have somewhere to like put your electrolytes. But what we found is that brands were, or consumers were going out of their way to add like the berry flavor as the second product they were buying, irrespective of any sort of discounts or incentive to do so. We just found that people wanted like the same product, but more variations of it. That's like one anecdote. But the reason I say that is if you can actually dig into the data and understand like contextual pairings and also recognize like in what categories are certain products performing well together, the underlying piece to that is like use the data to help tell that story versus just like trying to guess what you think is working. And we've found like pretty sizable uplifts in AOV just solely based on like strong pairing logic versus like generic pairs.
It's fascinating to hear you say that because I know one of the things that at least we used to do a lot of in the past as it pertains to email and SMS or retention, let's say, is we would try to put people on this perfect customer journey. So to use your supplement example, let's say they bought protein powder, we would relentlessly try to cross-sell them like a creatine, right? Because you would think it's the logical pairing. But we've seen way higher repeat purchase rates moving when we just actually resell the original item that people bought. So I think, especially as it pertains to our job, not necessarily yours, we try so hard to predict consumer behavior. And you like to create this magical customer journey that you think they should go on. But the reality is, it just doesn't work like that at all. So it's so interesting to hear as it pertains to on site behavior. You've seen similar things as well.
Yeah, and look, I always preface this in saying like no two brands are the same, right? Which is the
No.
reason we use data to determine the decisions. So like all because I give you an example of one supplement brand doesn't mean that every supplement brand is going to operate the same. I think
Correct.
the main takeaway there is to like actually look in the data and understand based on historical orders with this product, what is the other product people are buying frequently with it, to ultimately have some guiding principle beyond just like vibes and thoughts.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to the big one that's on a lot of people's LinkedIn and Twitter feeds I see all the time is the shipping threshold. When should you offer it? Should you not? It seems as though in the past, at least from what I've seen, this was always just a given, right? You would throw in free shipping and then people would just say you have to absorb the cost because Amazon do it and you need to compete. I'm actually seeing a reverse of that in the last couple of years. I'm not saying all brands do it, but I'm seeing a lot of people to advise putting that back in as an incremental way to increase AOV. Curious to hear from your experience. What are you seeing? Is it an effective strategy? Does it cannibalize conversion rates, right? Because you can obviously increase the AOV, but then if you lose, half the people who are going to convert, then it's a pretty pointless exercise. Curious to know see what you're seeing.
Yeah, from our perspective, like we don't treat free shipping as a growth lever. We actually just see it as like table stakes because so many brands are doing it, and it's more like you're creating this negative sentiment of like if a consumer's shopping and the first five sites they saw had some free shipping threshold and then you don't, they're like, wait, why are you different? So from our perspective, like we do believe that it's like a table stakes thing, but if we're working with you explicitly around like how do we increase AOV, there's definitely other like mechanisms that we would resort to first as like the main lever, right? So an example for you in the context of like a cart, like a free gift with purchase,
Yep.
like that creates like a sense of desire, or like a build your own bundle type behavior, which is like an increase in perceived value and also a reduction in decision fatigue because we're letting you kind of like decide which products you want to add. And then the third piece is what I'd mentioned, which is the contextual cross sells. So I would say like the answer to your question is like we kind of treat it as a table stakes thing because everyone does it. And to be honest, like I can't speak so much to you had alluded to seeing there's data around actually removing it and being more successful for people, which like I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. But by no means do we look at free shipping as like this novel, unique, clever thing that a brand is doing now that no one ever thought of. It's like everyone is doing it. So it's like how do you just not let that mechanism be the thing that causes pause or negative sentiment to continue driving someone forward? And then where can you introduce levers in other places that maybe aren't as like noisy?
Yeah, it's fascinating discussion, isn't it? I think this transverses onto the conversation around the future of D2C brands and how you can compete with Amazon, because people tend to just follow whatever they're doing and then think they need to compete. But I think there's lots of creative ways, which we probably beyond the scope of this, that they can actually create a better experience than Amazon, or at least differentiated. But as I said, it's a big topic for another day, not really just about AOV.
Yeah.
So this is something that falls in my wheelhouse. I'm curious to hear what you've seen. There is obviously like a threshold, right, of like how much AOV hacking I think you can do without, like you said in the initial introductory opener, creating a negative customer experience. Have you seen any instances where that's the case and it affects the repeat purchase behavior? For example, selling people shit they don't need, basically, or just trying so hard, to juice LTV on the first purchase, which I think does make sense to some extent. But as I said, there has to be like a threshold to it. What have you experienced around this?
Our experience is that a lot of brands actually just straight up analyze AOV in the wrong way. Right. So like this might be getting a little bit nuanced, but I know this is something that you spend a lot of time on. Like a brand that sells a mix of like $20 baskets and $80 baskets can have the same AOV as a brand that sells like $50 baskets, right?
Mhm.
So understanding like you need to segment your different cohorts to see like what the AOV is at each threshold, because trying to get the customer that spends, if you have a $50 average AOV, like, and you're trying to get the customer who spends $20 to spend $27, or the customer that's going to spend $80 to spend $87, those are very different mechanisms, and presumably you have very different products in your catalog to be able to like drive that. So I think the answer to your question is when people like don't segment out their different like cohorts and track like that repeat purchase behavior over time, you're just trying to like apply a blanket statement strategy to like people that are vastly different in terms of their behavior, right? Like you can't forget that AOV stands for average,
Mhm.
but like average is not the thing you want to look at when you're trying to drive incremental, because you need to segment it out and understand the different cohorts.
That's absolutely true. And we do exactly the same things as it pertains to retention. So we will slice and dice by the product they purchase, look at the lifetime value, repeat purchase behavior. And like you said, if you just sort of aggregated all the data, especially for a store, right, with like a very broad catalog and assortment, it's not really going to give you the right strategy to follow. And interestingly, I've seen instances for our work where we've looked at the average retention or repeat purchase rates. And then when you drill down, you can find some golden nuggets. Like there's a product in the catalog that they're not promoting that actually they should realign their acquisition strategy to. So I think that's the problem, as you said, of just looking at averages, especially big stores, right? With a lot of data, it can really lead you to pursue the wrong strategy.
Exactly.
So let's finish off, Ben, on quite a fun one that Coffee created for us. So let's say a Shopify founder is listening to this on the way home, and they're looking for one big change they can make to increase AOV over the, let's not even say the next year, let's say the next month. What would that change be and why?
Yeah, I alluded to this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but I'm gonna die on this hill, which is simply just fixing the pairing logic of your upsell products. Like understanding every consumer is different and using data to recognize for this person based on the products they look like they're gonna buy as resembled by the products already in their cart. What is the next best thing that I should show them? If you can hone in your pairing logic, you will likely see a very substantial AOV lift if you get it right. And presumably, you should use historical data to project forward looking behavior. And so, if you're a big enough store with enough data and you have not done so, like that is absolutely the first place I would start.
We're really, and I know you've worked with a lot of subscription brands as well. Have you seen any of the, well, this logic, right, perfectly carries over to subscriptions. So tiering the incentives in a way to create that stickiness. I'm guessing a lot of these strategies you could apply to the buy box, right? And like how to get people to increase the take rate on the first purchase. And then also importantly, stick around, like tiering this sort of stuff together, like the pairings of the products.
Yeah, because as far as like the take rates, again, think about it. If you have a new customer coming for the first time, again, it's a game of averages. So it's
Mhm.
like, despite the fact that my AOV might be $50, if I'm recognizing that the two most popular cohorts that I have are people that spend $20 and people that spend $80, it's like, how do I use that data to architect like the first offer and more so like to architect the next product that I'm going to try to upsell you as a function of price point based on how these people are behaving.
Mhm. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Well, look, there's so many more tactics and strategies and things that you could do. And I think we need to have another conversation on some of these next time. But how can people find more about you? And obviously, you're active on pretty much every channel. What's the best place to follow you?
Yeah, I'm Ben Sharf on all socials, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. Our website is platter.com, and my email is ben@platter.com if you have any questions about your website.
I'm going to give a plug specifically for your YouTube channel, mate, because I love following it. And I don't think, I know it's hard to crack YouTube, right? Like I know you're doing well on Instagram and LinkedIn. We've all sort of got some traction there. But I think your YouTube for me is really enjoyable and relatable. And I want to give a special plug for people to follow you on that because I know you must put a lot of effort into those videos. And obviously, I've been out to meet you. And it's just really fun and great, authentic content. And we need more of it. So, yeah, if you don't already, definitely check Ben's channel out. I'll drop a link to that in the bottom of the show notes.
I appreciate that. I will. I'll let you in on a little secret that I haven't told anyone about yet. But the next video that we're doing, and then potentially turning it into a series, is basically comparing the behind the scenes of building a brand, doing $0 in revenue, a million, 10 million, and 100 million. So I have basically spent a full day with founders at every one of these levels to just like show you the problems they're thinking about and how they think about solving them depending on what level they're at. So it's definitely hyper relevant to this conversation.
Man, honestly, it's really great content, very authentic, and obviously you're revealing so many juicy details as well, which most people put a lot of bullshit out. So it's really refreshing to see, and I enjoy it a lot. So thank you for your time, man. Really appreciate it. And for anyone watching, make sure to check out all the links in the description. Ben, I'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it.